I'm talking. Well,
This is Bruce.
so we got a nut that wasn't the GM one that came from Lansing, Michigan. It's a 20 millimeter by 1.50 pitch. It's the same as it's a Dorman. Dorman has a part that you can get at like O'Reilly's. It's a CV. It's like a CV axle nut for a Honda. And it worked the same. I torqued it at first to 140 foot-pounds to test my threads. And then I took it apart, pressed the bearings and stuff, put Loctite and torqued it to 120 foot-pounds, which is probably way excessive.
Wow, I missed the bearing pressing, but that's all right.
Sorry.
And this is, oops.
That's our crusty one.
This is one that's, you can't hear it with the phone, but.
Shake it.
Yeah, when you shake it, you can hear it go tick, tick, tick. That means it's no good. So we're starting on the uphill side now.
Of course, the phone rings right when you're trying to get something done.
I know, that's why I'm afraid.
Everybody knows that one.
That's why I'm afraid to call you.
When you're pressing the bearings into this thing, you want to make sure that the long side goes inside the torque tube. Another thing that you should know is when you first press this out, you take off the bolt or the nut where we had the problem, and you press it. You just press it out, and it's going to have one bearing on it. Don't try to press it out any other way, because there's snap rings inside of this tube that stop the bearings. And then to put it back together, I press this bearing into the collar first up against its snap ring, and then I cut the old bearing in half and rest it on the rest of the inner collar, so you're pressing inner collar on the outside bearing, and then press the shaft down through the whole mess. So if you're not familiar with like pressing stuff, and it's very easy to destroy one of these bearings. They're like $123 a piece.
That's just the, yeah, that doesn't.
That's the, you just ate $100 deal. Now we're gonna slide this back into the torque tube. Okay. You want to make sure you line up your bearing. I've seen guys smash this in here and mess up those couplers. I mean, I pulled it with my bare hand, and it should be pretty well seated. If it looks like the snap ring won't go on, once again, gentle tap with a rubber mallet. If a 5-pound sledge comes into play at any point in this thing, something's wrong. Now let me see if I can find what I did with the snap ring. Here we go. Big snap ring. Big pliers. Let's see if we can get this right the first time. If you look carefully at this snap ring too, you're probably not going to be able to see it on the video, but it has a taper on the edge of it. Okay, that's important too. Usually the paint's going to be on the outside. If you try to put it in like this, it's not going to go in.
Huh.
I know that because I've tried to put it in that way before. Sorry, I'm not prepared. Here we go. Sometimes it's easier just to take a set of long needle nose and make a plier, make a snap ring plier than it is to use a snap ring plier. And that went in really easy.
So we have the drive shaft inserted into that tube. Bearings are on, couplers are on, snap rings are on.
Just cleaning some of the grime out of it.
Yeah.
That's not mandatory. We'd like it to look nice.
Well, you only get one shot at it once you've got
There's
all of
no-
this stuff done.
There's no value in putting greasy, dirty parts back on your customer's car.
Okay, there's the clamp that you saw in the other video. Oh, that's that spline. It's split. I see.
That's why you gotta torque it, because you get the whole tranny and everything in there, and then you'll. People hit it with their half-inch impact, and that thing goes snap. We might have to come up with a new plan for that. No, it's gonna be painless.
Just to keep it from rolling, huh?
Yeah, it's Or you can stick it up there in the.
We're trying to torque those down, which is very difficult because the whole assembly wants to roll.
When you phone a friend. Help.
Yeah, to do this all by yourself is very impressive.
It's impressive or stupid, one or two, right? Let's see if that makes it easier. Let it roll, let it roll.
A little further and it should stop. Yeah.
Whoop. Those bolt heads are really thin. I think we stopped about here.
Now that that plate's in there.
So when you make a mistake, it's easier just to say that I forgot to put the plate on when we put it on last time. So I screwed up. Now I fixed it. I like to mark the converter where it was.
Ah,
It's kind of,
right.
some people think it matters, some people don't, but
One thing for sure is it won't hurt.
It's better than, it's not gonna hurt anything to mark the converter and put everything back exactly like it was. So then you don't have to take it back apart to identify some strange vibration. It should all be balanced anyway, but I've seen people rotate a converter 180 degrees and have it do some kind of vibration.
Ah.
Don't ask me why. I never will know. So you just mark it. And then you have a pump.
That's why the dealer says it's 2 hours to rebuild the tube, and it's 9 hours to take it out and put it back in.
7 hours to remove and replace complete assembly.
Yeah, well, that's
9 hours to remove, rebuild, assembly, and replace.
well. The dealer told me 9 hours to
Remove and replace?
yeah, and 2 hours on top of that to rebuild.
So what they did was they took the labor. I mean, I'm going by Mitchell On Demand's labor.
Yeah.
So they took the labor for remove, rebuild, and charged you, said that to replace, and then who knows what kind of Shylock.
So it's yeah, but I went to the dealer just to see because I didn't know anything about it, and that gave me something to use as a reference. But I would find somebody like Bruce to do it, and don't do it with the dealer.
Somebody that lets you watch.
Yeah, that's another thing. You're not allowed in the shop, insurance reasons.
What's insurance for?
Transmission fluid lines. You have to bring transmission fluid from the transmission all the way up to the transmission cooler and radiator, and that's what these lines are for.
Okay, now it's sitting in there. So now we can make some preparation. We need to go up a little more, no worries. We gotta put our wiring stuff in place. Don't break your tranny cable, because that sucks to replace. Are you recording this?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
We're rolling.
here we go. Here's the real problem with Corvettes. Nobody ever takes the time to make sure that all the little clips are underneath the bolt and clip back in place and make sure the wiring harness is where it's supposed to be. It's 90% of the stuff I clean up. Just take your time and make sure everything's where it's supposed to go. And then the next guy won't be cussing you and saying what a terrible job you did.
Yeah, because you just can't get back up in there unless you take.
Well, and now also,
Exhaust
after
off.
you run these bolts into the torque tube, now also is a good time to torque that 10 millimeter Allen.
On that clamp.
Make sure this is tight first because you don't want it to distort You want to make sure that this is butted up there and tight, and then it's a good time to torque that clamp. So if it does break, you don't have to take the whole car back apart. You just slide it back, order the clamp.
Is that primary?
I've never broken one, but I've seen people break them.
Is that primarily what this access port's for?
That access port is,
So you could get to that
yeah,
clamp?
it's kind of to look for leaks too. I mean,
I see.
They're notorious to leak from the back plate.
So
more the C5s than the C6s.
The manufacturer just took advantage of it.
Yeah, the plate, I mean, you have to have some way to access that 10 millimeter. You can't,
Right.
you know, you can't do anything. You can't get it. You won't be able to get the C5s had a cutout right here across the bell housing that you could unbolt, and you could actually do the clutch through the cutout, which was kind of nice. Where on these, on all the 05 and up cars, you have to actually remove the bell housing, and that often entails a little lowering of the front cross member to be able to really get the bell housing out clean. And that's not fun. And this access hole here is to do the torque converter bolts. I've also heard of guys like pulling the torque tube off with the torque converter still. Let me tell you, you'll never get the torque converter back in the transmission correctly with it hooked to the torque tube. It'll be a disaster. Yeah. Times, you push times and then 7.875%. It's easier to put the mufflers on while everything's still kind of dangling, especially on automatic.
Oh, really?
Especially on a C6. C5s, no problem. But C6s, oh God.
308.17.
I like to put a little wheel bearing grease on the things so they'll slide into the coupler, because I'm getting too old to fight those damn things. Whenever you take this, whenever you're taking off the transmission cable, do yourself a favor and just take the nut off and take the arm off. You'll break this little plastic thing, gets all dry, and it'll break, and then it'll just be a nightmare. Just take the nut off. It makes it so much easier. And then you're not buying a $70 tranny cable and spending another 2 hours putting it in your customer's car for free.
Rear cross member.
Oh, almost screwed up. Brake caliper. That's important. And if you get to that point and you haven't put the mufflers on yet, now's a good time to stop and put the mufflers on. The brake line clip is clipped. The brake line's not rubbing the cross member anywhere. The brake line clip up here is clipped. Also not rubbing. The wiring harness is clipped in its correct little clipping location on both sides. The tranny's plugged in. Everything's tight. All the wiring, oh, the wiring harness on the tranny's clipped in. The midship plate's tight. The lines are hooked up. The clips are in good. I'll put the exhaust back on this thing and fire her up. We need to put the torque converter bolts in and hook up the torque converter and put the exhaust on, and
Then we can do it.
bells, we'll do our after run. We're almost there.
Well, there you go, folks. You got nothing to do on a Saturday afternoon?
Good work.
Wow. Well, I sure learned a lot. Man. Wow. What a difference. There it is. No more noise.